Coming up on We Talk News this week.
In a few moments, I will also sign historic cannabis reform legislation in the state of Maryland to ensure that the rollout of recreational cannabis in our state drives opportunity in an equitable way.
Starting on July 1st, Maryland will join 21 other states with a legal adult use market for cannabis. U.S. tax revenues generated by legal cannabis sales for 2022 actually declined for the first time. Is that another doom and gloom sign? Plus, the U.S. Secret Service eases its restrictions on past cannabis use for applicants, and cannabis sales in Vermont hit an all-time high. All that, plus coast-to-coast cannabis news reports on We Talk News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
We are Pro-Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News for this week. I'm Alaina Pinto. Safe banking continues to gain momentum in the U.S. Senate with a bipartisan group trying to get the bill in front of the Senate Banking Committee as soon as possible. We all know that soon in Cannabis Standard Time could be next week or next year. And that's why we enjoy hearing from our D.C. correspondent, Andrew Behringer, who is right in the middle of that area while also reporting on Maryland. And that's where their governor signed their adult use sales bill into law this week. So here's Andrew's report from the DC area.
Well, it's official. The governor of Maryland has officially signed the bill for adult use cannabis sales in Maryland. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at the breakdown. Cannabis will be taxed at 9%. Medical cannabis sales will be exempt from the tax altogether. 35% of cannabis tax revenue will go towards Community Reinvestment Fund, with counties, a public cannabis health fund, and a cannabis business assistance fund, each getting another 5%. The 5% in revenue that goes to the counties will then be divided up, with 50% going to local municipalities based on cannabis sales where those sales take place in those jurisdictions. A separate and new independent Maryland Cannabis Administration will be responsible for regulating the program. Existing medical cannabis dispensaries, which is a decent number here in Maryland, will be converted into dual licenses at the time of the legalization that takes effect. What date? July 1st, 2023, if they've paid a conversion fee. Regulators will need to start approving additional cannabis business license by July 1st, which is the indication of round 2. And when I say July 1st, I mean, of course, 2024, which would then give a full year for this new administration to figure out all the speed bumps and hiccups in the first round. Ultimately, there will be a licensing cap for regular business licenses of 300 dispensaries, 100 processors, and 75 growers. Now remember, there's two types of licenses. There's a standard license and a micro business license. Now, for instance, the standard license for a grow is up to 300,000 square feet. That is a decent size grow. Looking at micro businesses, you're looking at 10 dispensaries, 100 processors, and 100 growers. Now, example on the micro business side, a grow facility is only allowed up to 10,000 square feet. And that is the biggest difference. Tune in next week where we will have a live and much more in-depth update on the Safe Banking Act that is making its way through at the federal level. And hopefully we make some progress on it. I'm Andrew Behringer. Have a great day.
So now with 22 legal adult use states, you would think that total tax dollars generated from the billions of dollars in sales of cannabis in this country would increase year over year, but did until last year. The Marijuana Policy Project reports that while $3.77 billion was generated in tax dollars from the sale of legal cannabis in the U.S. in 2022, that was a little less than the $3.86 billion collected in 2021. Remember, legal sales began in 2014 when Colorado and Washington State were the first to legalize the sale of cannabis to adults. Since that year, a total of just over $15 billion in tax dollars has been collected. Michigan is one of the biggest markets for legal cannabis sales and checks in at number 4 behind California, Illinois, and Washington. And our Michigan correspondent, Rick Thompson, has been right in the middle of that market's challenges since the beginning. Now, that state wants a state run testing lab to alleviate the corruption that has been going on there for some time. So here's Rick's report from Michigan this week.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. A Detroit news story from Tuesday dropped some new information about the ongoing federal corruption probe into Michigan's legislature and their relationship to the cannabis industry. You've heard me speculate that Greenpeace Skymint was one of the 2 unnamed companies accused by the feds of paying bribes to former Speaker of the House Rick Johnson during the Cannabis Licensing Board's control of the new medical marijuana business industry. Now the Detroit News has named Skymint as Company C, confirming all that we suspected of them. Greenpeace has given thousands of documents to federal investigators detailing conversations had between their principals and corrupt lobbyists and financiers. Now, this is really bad news for Jeff Radway, the ousted, ashamed former CEO. Radway is accused in several lawsuits of breaking the law or misrepresenting Skymint as being more financially stable than they actually were. One of those lawsuits comes from his soon-to-be ex-wife, who's suing for divorce, and another one from his nephew, Joe Neller. Now, Neller was a co-founder of Skymint and acted as a lobbyist for the group until he had way too much fun and was forced into rehab and bounced out of the company. Radway says his nephew owes him more than $1 million and earlier this year sued to get it. Neller countersued, claiming Radway perpetrated fraud and misconduct. In April, just about the time Skymint bounced Radway out of their company, the 2 lawsuits were mysteriously dropped. I predict that neither man will emerge from this criminal investigation unscathed, because during the time of interest to the feds, Radway was throwing money around like it was candy, and Neller was the primary person dropping the money candy into special PAC funds. Skymint certainly isn't protecting either man, as their cooperation with the feds indicates somebody from their company was doing the bribey thing. Also suggested as a conspirator in the whole mess is the now defunct trade group Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, who routinely encouraged their members to contribute to the questionable slush funds, which have landed Johnson and others in the federal crosshairs. Now, that group's former leader and golem of the industry, Steve Linder, has been named in several articles written about this scandal. Now, despite Skymint's lies and bribes and attacks on patients and caregivers, they are among the worst performers in the Michigan market. The company is in receivership. They owe more than $125 million to creditors. There was an eviction proceeding begun on their huge garden complex, and their purchase of the 315 chain of dispos has hit some major snags. They're also reportedly losing about $3 million per month. Now, in the corruption probe, 3 people have already pleaded guilty to the charges, and the 4th will be in court today to do the same. Now, there's another lawsuit that's captured headlines this week. The most distrusted lab in Michigan, Viridis Labs, has petitioned the judge in their ongoing lawsuit against the Cannabis Regulatory Agency to force the government to give up more documents and reports. Viridis, you'll remember, was the target of the state's largest recall of cannabis products, and a judge later determined that half of those products recalled could once again be sold. Viridis has sued the CRA, including individual employees of the state agency, claiming they acted with malicious intent when trying to punish Skymint for falsely inflating THC numbers and using an unapproved testing method to do so. Now, this is a serious lawsuit, and it looks to be going forward for a long time. And that's the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
The next state to vote in legal sales of cannabis might be Ohio. The coalition to regulate cannabis like alcohol has been active in that state legislature on advocacy issues, but since those elected officials have not made any progress on reform, it looks like Ohio will have to come up with 124,000 signatures before July 5th to get the adult use question on the ballot in the fall. But in the meantime, in Vermont, a new sales record for the month of February was reported by the Heady Vermont News Agency. Over $6.4 million was sold in the Green Mountain State in the middle of winter. Remember, that state was the first in the union to vote in legalization through the legislative process and not the ballot box. And that's where our green nurse, Jessilyn Dolan, lives. And here is her Vermont report for this week, sponsored by Canatrol.
I'm Jessilyn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. One of, if not the biggest and best thing to come to Vermont. On Friday, May 5th in Essex, Madame Cannoli, widow to the infamous Frenchie Cannoli, and Cherry Blossom Bell, an Emerald Cannabis Cup multiple award winner, hash maker, and apprentice of Frenchie's, is hosting the Lost Art of Hashishin workshop and the movie premiere of the documentary Frenchie Dreams of Hashish in the evening. Madame is keynote speaker at this weekend's NECAN Vermont Cannabis and Hemp Convention being held on May 6th, speaking on the history of cannabis concentrates, with Bell speaking right after on the craftsmanship of solventless concentrates. NECAN Vermont is on May 6th and 7th and is the largest annual cannabis event in Vermont, 6th year running, with over 120 local and national exhibitors and over 50 speakers, including yours truly. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessilyn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com.
Another state that is starting to make moves towards adult use is Pennsylvania. Even though that state has had a medical program for years, a bill to open up state-run adult use cannabis dispensaries was introduced in their legislature this week. Claudia Post has more from the Keystone State.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. This is big news. Pennsylvania lawmakers have filed new bills to legalize marijuana sales through state-run stores and to provide permits for farmers and small agricultural businesses to cultivate cannabis once adult use sales are allowed. About 2 months after circulating a co-sponsorship memo for the legalization proposal, Representative David Deloso formally introduced legislation on Tuesday. The bill would allow adults 21 and older to possess, consume, cultivate, and purchase cannabis through a state store system run by the Liquor Control Board. Let me reassure you, this is going to be a disaster for adult use in Pennsylvania. That is my opinion. There are no states in the entire country that sell cannabis through the Liquor Control Board. And we are only one of 2 states that has a Liquor Control Board. Wake up, Pennsylvania. Retail cannabis sales would be taxed at 19%, and all of the revenue that would go toward the state general fund. The bill would also create a distinct regulatory scheme for industrial hemp. I can't wait for the comment period. Notably, the legislation, which has 20 initial co-sponsors, also contemplates allowing cannabis imports from other states or counties where marijuana is legal. Well, that's great because I believe in the Dormant Commerce Clause. I've spoken to you about that before. It would allow interstate commerce. It would also prohibit regulators from importing marijuana that is produced somewhere that doesn't accept exports from Pennsylvania. So it's a quid pro quo. Deloso believes permitting private companies to sell cannabis in Pennsylvania could allow large corporations to take over the cannabis industry, putting profits before the well-being of our communities. I don't want to be jaded here, but do you think that the liquor lobby had anything to do with this? Whoa. He said for these reasons, reasons the legislation will legalize adult use cannabis through the current state store system in order to ensure the safety and integrity of cannabis sales in Pennsylvania. Okay, it's being sold by MSOs and other people. I cannot believe this. I am incensed. Former Flyers enforcer Riley Cote said the bumps and bruises and the concussions that came as a result of 51 National Hockey League fights weren't the hardest part of his job to deal with. I know Riley, he's a really good person. Feeling spiritually empty, Cote turned to parties, alcohol, prescription painkillers, and muscle relaxers to quell the emotional pain. Toward the end of his career, after reading Hemp for Health by Chris Conrad, Cote learned about the medicinal uses of cannabis. Cote used cannabis intentionally and mindfully as an alternative medicine to addictive prescription drugs. Not only did he experience cannabis as a pain management tool, but he also learned that cannabinoids like CBD can have anti-inflammatory properties in the brain. His initial interest led him to learn about the potential of psilocybin mushrooms to treat mental health issues. Cote experienced using psilocybin mushrooms at legal psychedelic therapy ceremonies in Jamaica, which is one of the focal points of a new episode of ESPN's called Peace of Mind. The episode follows a retreat run by Wake Network, a Toronto-based organization that's working further to introduce plant-based medicine with the help of clinical research. Cote assembled a group of retired professional athletes, including former Flyers wing Steve Downey and Philadelphia-born former NFL offensive lineman Justin Renfro, to attend the retreat. It was an amazing experience for all of them. It treated their depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Please look out for this special with Riley talking about the potential of psilocybin to treat mental health issues. Okay, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania from Weed Talk News. Have a fabulous week.
On the publicly traded cannabis stock front, Green Thumb Industries released their first quarter financials, and the multi-state operator did have a year-over-year increase in revenue, but did that impact their stock value? Well, who better to answer that question than our own market trader, Doug Miller from High on Wall Street.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Maryland Governor Wes Moore, he owns $1.2 million of Green Thumb Industry stock. He was a board member, but he has since resigned, and it's been put into a blind trust, and that was announced to prevent any conflicts of interest. Well, the stock's trading around 730. It's curling up. Looks like it's about to go on a nice run, but be sure to lock in those profits. The market is crazy, and that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
Increases in sales, taxes, and jobs. That's been the biggest effect in Missouri since they started their adult use sales a few months ago. Month over month, growth continues to increase, and our own Brandon Jones is right in the middle of it. That is, when he's free from his Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl celebrations and NFL draft hostings. Here's our Missouri report, sponsored by Baker Brands.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, Missouri has passed $250 million since recreational has passed here in the last 3 months. It's been pretty crazy, and yes, we're seeing a lot of business from out of states. You might wonder, well, why are you here at a soccer stadium right now? So I'm here at the KC Current. It's going to be the only women's professional sports stadium for women's soccer in the world, built right here in Kansas City. If you didn't know, we got the World Cup coming, lots of events. So a lot of people are coming to Kansas City, Missouri, being able to check out the cannabis scene We saw it a lot with the Super Bowl party. Everybody was coming in. Like saw Eddie Griffin down here in downtown Kansas City getting ready to perform at Uptown Theater. And then we've also got the MMA fights that are happening tonight. One of my close personal friends, Macmo Green, is on the card. He also works in the cannabis industry here in Missouri and has his own paper line, Wear Major Packs. So we're getting ready for the World Cup, just had the draft. Cannabis scene is being crazy. So please get down to Kansas City. And next weekend, we got a huge CannaFest down in the Ozarks. So got the MMA fight, lots of Cinco de Mayo parties, Feel State, and Timeless is actually throwing a huge block party here in Kansas City. So if you don't know what to do on Cinco de Mayo, look down at 19th and Locust, downtown Kansas City. Go check out the Timeless block party. Everybody, get to Kansas City, get to Missouri. The cannabis scene, construction, everything is happening here. Can't wait to see everybody out here in Missouri. Again, I'm Brandon Jones with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Have a great week. Stay educated and medicated.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
Turning to the international scene over in Europe, some countries continue to struggle to find the right path to decriminalization, if not full legalization. 2 countries actually took big steps backwards, as our European correspondent Lex Pelger tells us that Italy and France continue to be battleground countries for acceptance.
Hello everybody, I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And it's a busy week in Europe for cannabinoids. In Italy, the military's halted production of medical cannabis at their Florence facility. With the military being the sole producer of medical cannabis in the country, this is bad news for Italy's 50,000 patients. Reports about the cause of the stoppage vary, with some sources reporting a chronic shortage of personnel and others saying it's part of a planned upgrade. In any case, it seems unlikely that the military will produce even 100 kilograms out of the 400 kilograms of cannabis requested by the Ministry of Health. Then in France, after a long legal uncertainty, the country adopted temporary novel food regulations for CBD. This framework is designed to only be in place until the EU finally completes its own CBD regulations. However, opponents of the new framework say that the requirement of zero THC results in a functional ban of full-spectrum hemp products. The French Association of Cannabinoid Producers argued strongly against the move, saying it will shift the market to isolated CBD from the US and Eastern Europe instead of locally made hemp extracts. This move does dovetail with France's long push to ban hemp flowers and a general resistance to hemp and the cannabinoids. Meanwhile, the Czech Republic will ban CBD and other hemp-derived cannabinoids, citing EU regulations. This is an odd move from a country about to flout EU regulations by legalizing adult-use cannabis. But while the European Commission did rule in 2020 that CBD is not a narcotic, and that it can be classified as a food that should enjoy the same free movement as other goods, the European Food Safety Authority has yet to complete their safety review. So the Czech Ministry of Health and Agriculture decided to ban all hemp foods and dietary supplements until that review is complete. And finally, for our quick EU snapshots, in Luxembourg, a cannabis legalization plan will soon be presented to the government. In Norway, protests lead to a functional stop of police enforcing cannabis laws. And in the UK, police have started a pilot program of giving out free cannabis vape pens to residents of public housing who are medical cannabis patients in order to cut down on complaints about the smell. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
In one of the East Coast's newest and biggest states for the sale of adult use of cannabis, New Jersey continues to be a work in progress. Like many new states in this market, many of the limited amount of dispensaries that have been licensed are being clustered in weed-friendly towns like Mount Laurel. Now, more out-of-state operations are trying to get into the Garden State, but once again, restrictions and compliance rules are stifling the launch. Jill Goldsberry has more from the Garden State.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weed Talk News New Jersey. And here's what's happening in the Garden State. In Red Bank, New Jersey, the planning board is holding up the site plans of a local applicant. The applicant submitted their application in May 2022, and completed it in April of 2023. Crossroads LLC seeks to exist as a retail sales operation and delivery operation in an existing location where a local liquor store is currently housed, where they will partially share the space and the parking lot. Crossroads has been issued a micro license, and micro license holders have a certain set of rules that they must adhere to. A few of them being that they must have less than 10 employees, their premises needs to be less than 2,500 square feet, and it must be majority locally owned. The holdup here seems to be several concerns of Red Bank's board for their DR1 zone. The section 489022 of their ordinance needs to be satisfied, and the satisfactions include no sale of alcohol or tobacco on the premises. Of course, this is a cannabis retail shop, so we're sure that that will be satisfied. The cannabis retail entrance must have a separate entrance from the liquor store, and plant products cannot be visible from the outside. And those are just a few of the stipulations that they must adhere to, including hours of operations, which should be between 8 and 10 a.m., 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. And they must have a solid security plan, which the town has cited that they do. The town spoke to several witnesses, including the shop owner of Crossroads LLC and their architect. So this whole meeting, the whole decision is going to be reviewed again at their next meeting, and then we'll know exactly what will happen with the site, if it will gain the location and opening. Moving right along, a new dispensary has been approved for Elizabeth, New Jersey, and it's making some history at the same time. Cannabis, a retail shop opening in Elizabeth, New Jersey at 1167 East Jersey Street will be opening sometime this summer. And the shop is named Cannabis Retail, spelled C-A-N-N A-B-Y-S. And as I said, it's slated to open this summer. It's locally owned and operated, and it's one of the first minority-owned retail shops in town. Owner Grelinski Charles, who's African-American, was approved during the first round of dispensary approvals in May of 2022. The shop will offer a selection, he mentioned, of concentrates, flower, tincture, topicals, pre-rolls, and accessories from various minority-owned cannabis entrepreneurs. The owners also made sure to make the dispensary a part of the community by focusing on partnering with local community organizations, such as the Last Prisoner Project and local reentry programs. For more information on this new dispensary, check out Cannabis, C-A-N-N-A-B-Y-S-S, dispensary.com. And if you plan on taking your love of cannabis to Manhattan this weekend, check out the Cannabis Parade and Rally happening this Saturday, May 6th. And this is the longest running cannabis legalization event in the world. It began in 1973 and has evolved into a 3-part event. The parade down Broadway, which is a rally in Union Park, and a celebratory after party. All 3 events will be happening this Saturday on May 6th. Check out the parade downtown Broadway starting at 11 a.m. and go to their website for more information. The parade starts on the east side of Broadway between 33rd and 32nd Streets, and it begins marching at 12:30. Hopefully we'll see you there. This is Jill for We Talk News. Thanks for watching, and have a great evening.
Jersey's big brother neighbor, New York, continues to have their own problems with launch and distribution of licenses. There are only 6 licensed operators in the Empire State, and the battle between the licensed and the legacy or illegal market continues to grow in public. Consumers can't tell if a storefront is legal or not in New York, and that opens up immediate conflict. The whole idea of launching a legal market for cannabis was to clean up the legacy market, and that hasn't happened. Interestingly, according to New Frontier Data, a market research firm out of California, 2 other new legal states, Arizona and Nevada, both have more legal sales than illegal sales, and Arizona just started in 2020. In Arizona, though, 55% of total sales are legal, and Arizona has 74% sold legally. So despite all the figures, New York continues to attract investors and consumers. And last week, MJ unpacked a major industry trade and investment show, made a stop in Manhattan, and Pam Schmiel has that story.
I'm Pam Schmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York City Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Cannabis industry events are tricky in many states because few dispensaries are open and the imbalance of cultivation, manufacturing, and retail licenses doesn't support the ecosystem. But the MJ Unpacked trade show in New York City last week provided a launch pad for the industry in its early days. It's a way for entrepreneurs and brands to gather, to meet, learn, and partner to ignite the industry. And the passion was high and the attitude was game on. And there's more bad news for New York regulators. Colorado company Terrapin pulls out of an agreement to build a cultivation facility in Auburn, New York, because of the state's slow rollout. And lawmakers also introduced legislation allowing farmers to sell their products directly to consumers. But dispensary owners aren't having it. They, too, are suffering from the state's inability to launch the cannabis industry. And lastly, cultivators are weighing whether to plant again for this year's harvest. But with few dispensaries open to sell products, makes it a risky bet. That's this week's New York City Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Schmiel from the Mary Jane Society podcast with Weed Talk News.
I'm Karen Black with Green Finger Consulting. Welcome to the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Arizona House Bill 2489 was signed into law by Governor Katie Hobbs on April 28th. The so-called PTSD Treatment Act of 2023 means products containing MDMA that are both approved by the FDA and downscheduled by the DEA for the treatment of PTSD will be able to be legally prescribed in Arizona. The new law goes into effect January 1st, 2026. Arizona Senators Kirsten Sinema and Mark Kelly have signed on in support of the federal 2023 Safe Banking Act, the latest version of which was reintroduced to Congress April 26th with strong bipartisan support. Another Arizona cannabis testing lab has been acquired. On May 3rd, Smithers, a 98-year-old international company based in Akron, Ohio, announced the acquisition of Green Scientific Labs' 10,500 square foot facility in Phoenix. The move adds Arizona to Smithers' cannabis testing portfolio, which includes operations in Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York. Chronicon, a large marijuana-friendly festival planned for May 20th at a historic working ranch outside of Tucson, has been canceled due to a massive restructuring at sponsors Arizona Daily Star and Tucson Media Partners. All advanced ticket sales will be refunded automatically. That's it for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
New Frontier Data released their annual report on consumer use of cannabis this week, and there were some interesting trends. For instance, did you know that there are 37% of U.S. adults who are active consumers, defined as those who use it at least once annually and plan to use it again in the future? Among those current regular consumers, 37% increased their consumption in the last year. And Amanda Ryman is the Chief Knowledge Officer for New Frontier Data. And she talked with PCM founder Jimmy Young earlier about some of the findings in this year's report.
Well, one of the things that was most interesting to me was the change in the number of consumers that exclusively consume non-flower products. So as you probably will guess, on the illicit market, flower is what is most available. And when you do have products that aren't flower, like vape pens and edibles on the illicit market, it can be tough to know if they're labeled properly, if they've been tested properly, whereas a lot of consumers feel they're a pretty good judge of whether they have good flower in front of them. So in 2020, Two, 17% of consumers said that they were only consuming non-flower products, and that rose to 21% in 2023. So we're definitely seeing an increase in people that are not using flower at all, but instead are choosing things like edibles, beverages, topicals, and tinctures in order to get their needs met.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good sign in that, A, we're being entrepreneurial with our approach to different products, different choices for the consumer to make, but also keeping them away from just smoking the product, which when I got my medical card in 2013, it was one of the first things I said to the bud tender was, I really am not sure I want to smoke it anymore. What are the other options?
Absolutely.
And now we're seeing more options, right?
Right. We're seeing more options, and we're also seeing the technology improve. So, one of the big Achilles heels of edibles was the onset time, right? So you take it, you don't feel it for an hour or two. It's very hard to titrate your dose. And so it lends itself to be more likely subject to overdose, right? Taking more than you intended. Right. Now we're seeing some amazing technology in the beverage space and the edible space that is creating a fast acting product. And I think that not only does this bring more people into that product vertical, but it allows these cannabis products to be a more suitable substitute for things like alcohol, where you want to enjoy the effect in the moment.
It is all about being in the moment now, isn't it? And that applies to more than just cannabis. Anyway, now it's time for the Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. There was a significant development in the Bay State this week involving the sale of seeds and clones to consumers who want to home grow. You can now buy them directly from licensed delivery, licensed dispensaries, and licensed medical facilities. It was just 6 months ago that the USDEA announced that seeds were legal to sell because they fall under the definition of hemp. Now, of course, you still have the pressure of growing a live plant in your house, and you are limited to just 6 plants per adult, with a total of 12 per dwelling if you have 2 adults in that house. Anyway, that's the abbreviated Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News. Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
One more state report for you, and it comes from Illinois. That state gets more tax revenue from cannabis than any other state in the union, except California. Illinois collected $562 million in sales tax for the year 2022. And with more from Illinois, here is Thomas Howard.
What's up, everybody? It's me, Tom. You can find me at CannabisIndustryLawyer.com, and I'm here to update you as to what happened last week in Illinois. They released how many people entered the social equity lottery for 55 dispensaries the state will be giving out later this summer. There were 2,699 entries. Which BLS region had the best odds? Well, that's interesting. It was a coin flip in Region 3, Carbondale, way at the very bottom of the state. Only 2 teams applied, so you have a 50% chance. Me and my co-host Miggy on Cannabis Legalization News. Check us out on YouTube on Sundays. We have a 9% chance of winning a dispensary in Peoria. If you applied in Chicago, you have a 1.5% chance. The most egregious applicant this time was a SE applicant, and then they just numbered them. In the St. Louis BLS region, they applied 50% of the time for those 3 licenses that are there. 85 applicants, approximately 45 of them were of this social equity person who is manipulating the lottery. They have a 91.x% chance of winning a license, because if you own half of the lottery tickets and they're going to draw it 3 times, you're very likely to walk away with at least 1 license. And I hope that we do, so I'd say vote for us, but it's a lottery, so that doesn't matter. That's what's going on in Illinois cannabis. Back to you, Alaina.
And finally tonight, Trulieve, one of the largest multi-state operators in the country and the #1 dispensary in Florida, is expanding to the state of Georgia. That state legalized medical use 8 years ago, but it took until this week to grant a license to operate to Trulieve. One of those stores that is going to open now is in Macon, Georgia. And for those who know their history of classic rock, that's the home of Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, the Allman Brothers Band. It happens to be PCM founder Jimmy Young's favorite band. Your fun fact of the day. And now you can check out the Allman Brothers Museum in Macon on your tour from a medical cannabis facility in their hometown. And that's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Alaina Pinto, and remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. Bye-bye. See you next time.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product. Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it. Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com.